Hi, my name is Amanda Stewart, and this is my presentation on gender inequality in education in Sub-Saharan Africa. The controversy over gender inequality in education on girls and women in Sub-Saharan Africa is of great concern as it pertains to the ongoing poverty issues that surround the region. Sub-Saharan Africa consists of 42 countries south of the Sahara and the 6 island nations close to it. I think we can all agree that education is important in the gaining of knowledge. But for a girl in Sub-Saharan Africa, it not only equates to knowledge gained, but it improves human lives. Girls are able to make informed decisions on healthcare. Their nutrition improves, provides self-confidence, that when they are able to make informed decisions on marriage and family, that trickles down to future generations, and it instills a sense of self-reliance that they didn't have before. Throughout this presentation, you'll see that the facts regarding gender inequality in Sub-Saharan Africa are quite disturbing. As you can see, Sub-Saharan Africa accounts for 47% of the world's out-of-school population. Of that 47%, 54% are girls. The primary school completion rates in Sub-Saharan Africa for boys is 56% and for girls is 46%. But in the countries of Burkina Faso, Guinea, Madagascar, Mozambique, and Niger, that number drops to less than 15%. So less than 15% of girls are completing schools in those 5 countries. And then when you move to higher education and secondary schooling, the completion rates for girls drops to 34%. So as you can see, the completion rate of education or schooling for girls in Sub-Saharan Africa is much less and not equal to those of boys that are able to complete school. Some of those reasons are barriers to education, such as negative cultural practices, which consist of early marriage, a girl's responsibility to household duties, female genital mutilation, poverty, which is the single largest factor that causes gender disparities in education, prominence of violence, whether it's war, violence in the home, and sexual harassment. We will discuss these in detail in the next few slides. So for cultural practices, these probably bother me the most because many of these are ancient, old practices that don't go along with today's society. While they may be, quote, normal in some of these African societies, they are normal for the older generations, and the newer generations are starting to fight back on some of these. So like early marriages, for example, girls get married shortly after puberty in a lot of these African villages. 1 in 8 girls is married by the age of 15. Once they are married, they are expected to leave school and take care of the household. And many get pregnant as a teenager. So 1 in 7 girls have given birth by the age of 17. And by that account, that could be multiple births by the age of 17. But they've had at least 1 birth by the age of 17. Female genital mutilation, which to me is probably one of the most disturbing, is entrenched, or kind of a rite of passage within some of these societies, and it marks a girl's transition into adulthood. The community views them as ready for marriage when they do this. Voodoo practices, this isn't as widely known, but there are some tribes, as they're called, that do perform voodoo practices or believe in voodoo practices. One of those fetish practices, such as trokosi, and I think I'm saying that right, where young virgin girls are sent to fetish shrines as slaves to pay for sins of their relatives. So they didn't even commit these sins, but they are given away as sort of an atonement for their sins of their fathers, brothers, mothers, uncles, aunts, that sort of thing. So when I think of Africa, besides poor, poverty-stricken land, I think of violence and wars, those in Rwanda, Somaliland, etc. Right now, more than a third of the 45 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa are involved in international civil wars. And this violence destroys the schools. The schools are used for housing for those that are displaced by the fighting, and they're also used to house the fighters, insurgents, whatever you want to call them, those that are fighting in the war. So they're destroyed either way. And then wars are expensive. I mean, $300 billion in the past 15 years has been spent on wars. And that is money that could have been spent on education and raising the country out of poverty, which is the single largest factor of why a girl doesn't receive an education. Moving on to poverty as a barrier, many families in Sub-Saharan Africa live on less than $1 a day. So they cannot afford the school fees because many of the schools are, they have a tuition type situation, uniform costs, transportation. A lot of the schools are not within walking distance. So the parents have to pay for the children to get to school and get home from school. And then in situations where they have multiple kids, they cannot afford to send them all to school, then the boys are chosen over the girls. They need the girls to stay home to perform household duties, and they need the boys to be educated so they can be the ones that go out and get a job and can help support their family in that way. So obviously there will be more than one legitimate way to look at the issue of gender inequality in education in Sub-Saharan Africa. Some of the disciplines that analyze such problems, sociologists, which is one of the perspectives we'll be looking at today, economists, women's and gender scholars, which is the other perspective we'll be looking at, and then policymakers. Those, and just to name a few, are a few of those that look at the global problem of gender inequality in education. The one that we'll be talking about right now is sociological perspective, which the overall reaching question could be viewed as what gender-based advocacy policies need to be put in place or restructured to achieve gender-based equitable education. And the question through women's and gender studies perspective, can gender imbalances in education be corrected in Sub-Saharan Africa, and how can women become involved in the political decision-making process and the design of policies that will serve women and their needs? So moving on, the primary theories and concepts of research from the discipline of sociology are conflict theory and functional theory. Now, conflict theory deals with competition for education, and that order is maintained by the boys dominating the education. Functional theory focuses on the capacities that education serves in satisfying general public's different needs. The most critical capacity of education is socialization. If girls are to become familiar with the standards and qualities and abilities that they need to work in society, then education is an essential vehicle for such learning. So women's and gender studies uses a reformist theory that focuses on the unequaled gender division of labor in the home and in the workplace. So the girls stay at home while the boys go to work. And then the devaluation of the women's work and the uneven presence of women in main institutions of society, such as politics and law. They coalesce around the concept of patriarchy. So a system of interlocked oppressions, exploitations of women's bodies, sexuality, labor, emotions, that sort of thing. So, when a girl receives an education, how does that have an impact on society? Or if she doesn't have an education, what are the impacts? So, for one, a girl with a higher education, they are less likely to have children at an early age. So, if they have a primary education, 10% fewer girls get pregnant under 17 years of age. Secondary education, so if they receive a secondary education, 60% fewer girls are pregnant under the age of 17. Girls with higher education are less likely to get married in an early age. Primary education, 14% fewer child marriages. And if they have a secondary education, 2/3 fewer child marriages. And then lower birth rates. If they have no education, then they are likely to have, on average, 6.7 births per woman. If they have a primary education, that drops down to 5.8 births per woman. And if they have a secondary education, that almost halves to 3.9 births per woman. So as you can see, the impact alone on a girl's life and society is huge.